She believes in working hard and playing hard. This week, we speak to Patricia Ithau on the realities of the challenges that come with leadership. This is She Means Business. I am your host, Claire Munde. Patricia, you know, you're working in a very a space that's evolving quite a bit, marketing and communication.
Yeah.
What would you say are the key areas of evolution in that space?
I think the first thing is that things are shifting so fast. You almost have to be agile and moving and changing every single day. I think what we cannot underestimate is the impact of technology, and in particular AI. The impact on the change in terms of the workforce and the kind of workforce you tend to attract in this particular industry. So I think all those changes are just happening so fast, and fortunately or unfortunately, if you're fortunate to keep up, you'll stay ahead. If you're unfortunate and not moving fast enough, you get left behind.
Yeah. We've talked about AI, and you cannot ignore the power of AI right now. And there's a whole move towards data. So what would you say the role of data is? Because, you know, there are people who talk about data-driven decisions, and then there are people who talk about gut feelings. So in your own space, in your leadership role, do you use data a lot, or is it a gut feeling?
I think it's a mix of both. I think yesterday, actually, just yesterday, I had a meeting with one of our key clients, and we're talking about this whole evolution of data and understanding our clients, and the fact that there's just so much more data now, and it's so much, I guess, easier to understand what your consumers, what people want, what their interests are, and everything else. So from that perspective, I think data is becoming even more key. And the person who wins is a person who has the ability, especially when it's communication, who's able to mine that and then be able to target that more distinctly towards somebody you want to speak to. Because again, what's happening now, we don't want to be bombarded with stuff that is of no interest to us. It's the one thing that irritates us the most. So if you're communicating to me and irritating me, you're not going to get me to swing onto your side. But then on the aspect of gut, I will say, speaking for me personally, there's always been a gut element that I refuse to give up on. And that is because there's something around instinct that you cannot ignore. You know, the thing is with technology, it will never have gut and it will never have instinct. So if we give up on that, then we're losing the human element that is going to be the power or the juice that we're going to, you know, be able to supply in a world that is purely data or technology driven. So I think it depends. You have to lean on both. And I think for me, when it comes also from a leadership point of view, I won't lie. I honestly and truly have often been driven by gut and people I could relate to, or people who I see things in. And so I think the two will always have to interchangeably play. Otherwise, we're going to lose the whole sense of humanity.
Okay. Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about, you know, okay, there's the gut feeling, and then you cannot ignore that. But are there instances where you have made a decision and you just realized, oops, that was the wrong move? And how did you bounce back from that?
Oh, it's many times. And you know, in this conversation, Claire, one of the things I wanted to really focus on is not just all the good things you do, but also the lots of mistakes that we all make, that I've made, and that you tend to think were great, and how do you bounce back from that? So yes, indeed, there have been mistakes. There have been mistakes around, you know, putting a lot more trust, perhaps, in things, in positions that have been shared and everything else, and said, because you trust someone so much, okay, let's go with it. And don't dig any deeper because of, for whatever reason. It could be trust, it could be, you know what, I'm busy, it could be laziness, it could be a whole load of reasons why you don't delve deeper sometimes. And I think the biggest thing I think I've learned from that is, how do you recover? First, how do you acknowledge that a mistake has been made, and that, listen, You could have done things differently. You could have, you know, paid a little bit more attention. You could have understood a little bit more. You could have challenged a little bit more. But the biggest thing is how does that allow you to grow? And so in the next time you face that situation, you ask the right questions, because that experience has grown you from that perspective.
Okay, and as you talk about the element of trust, how do you make sure that, you know, as a leader, you have a lot of things that you have to attend to.
Yes.
How do you make sure that you're not micromanaging, or you are delegating the right things, and at the same time not leaving one thing hanging in the balance, and then you realize, oops, I dropped a ball?
I think it's been one of my biggest challenges from a leadership perspective, because quite frankly, I am very much I'm not a micromanager. And I also don't like to be it comes from a front that I don't like to be micromanaged. If you don't like to be micromanaged, what you don't like, you try not to put on others. So I think when I look and I reflect on some of the feedback that I've always realized is, how do you flex leadership a lot more? You start to recognize that you learn to realize the people who want more direction, and the ones who, once you guide them, they're okay and they run from it and they run with it. And I think for me, the micromanagement I find now comes when there's been a bit of trust broken. And then now you have to double check. But my natural instinct is to trust and to sit and we agree, and if that is what to be done, to assume that everything is running. I default more to micromanagement when that doesn't happen. And it's a good thing, and it's also a bad thing, because then it could also lead to a lot of reactions as opposed to proactivity in managing situations.
Okay, now I'd like us to talk a little bit about your career journey. You've had quite an illustrious career. Have you managed your career by design, or have you just found yourself in one role to the next? So talk to us about designing your career and how to make sure that you get to where you want to be.
Oh my goodness, this is very interesting. I think everybody starts off thinking, at least in our time. I think when I look at our generation, they don't. They roll with it and they look to see what is happening. But in my generation, we tended to want it to manage. This is going to be my next stage. I started Unilever, then I want to be a marketing manager, then I want to be a marketing director, then I want to be this and I want to be that. And that, I guess, is the way I planned and structured the path that I went through, some of the decisions that I made in order to achieve that. So when I reflect from a perspective of, have I designed things? Yes, a lot of times I have. I have done things to make sure I get the outcome that I want. So, for example, when I started my career at Unilever and recognized that to get to the next level, which is the executive level, you needed more international experience. I took the bold step and said, okay, whatever it's going to take, I was going to get that international experience. And then when I decided that, you know what, I've done enough of marketing, I really want to get into general management, taking that bold step to sit down and say, just give me something. Let me try something first, and then let's try and evolve it to different things. And then when I decided, you know what, I want to take a stab at the impact space, really working on giving back, I took a step back and spent all those years that I spent with Stanford Seed, with the Impact and the Accelerator program, and you know, getting fulfillment from that. And then now in my current role, when I felt, oh my goodness, maybe I should give myself one last stab before I retire, retire in quotes, at a commercial role. I was lucky enough to get this particular opportunity and do it. So yes, there has been some planning and pushing. Has it always worked? No. But in the end, when I reflect back, I figure, you know, everything has been a learning. And you know, they say the vision of hindsight is always 2020.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you've talked about that element of international experience, and a lot of our guests on She Means Business have talked about that importance when you need to go to the next level. Now, I'd like us to talk about work-life balance or integration, and how you manage that, you know, your professional life, your personal life, when you're thinking about taking a new role. How do you think of it in terms of family and what that means for those dynamics?
I think some of the hardest decisions, were when I had to make a choice to work outside of the country, because the consideration came, especially when you've got children. And I think those were some of the tougher decisions. But I kept telling myself, and it's something I always repeat, you always have to ask yourself why you're doing it. What is the end game? What is the objective you have? And if that objective is clear and it's true to getting you to the next stage, then do it, right? So I have never, I think I've embraced this concept that life is not a seesaw or a lever where when you do one goes up, the other one goes down, you know. You have to find a way of embracing a world where your whole life and what you do, right, is that they're all things that are important to you and to what you want to do in your life, right? So you shouldn't feel any guilt when you're doing one beyond the other. And if you can get to that space, I think that is what allows you to win. And that is what's allowed me to be comfortable in the decisions that I've made in terms of the career choices that I've made.
Wow, yeah. Wow. Now let's talk a little bit about, you know, it's International Women's Month, and we're talking about accelerate action. You know, there are people who have, there are two kinds of people. There are people who say, you know, why are we only talking about women? Women having issues, men also have issues. And there are others who say, you know, we have to balance the skills. You know, we're talking about the skills. So where do you fall in that? Do you feel that women leaders have unique situations, or it's just a leader? There's no woman leader, it's just a leader.
Oh my goodness, that's very difficult, and I have to be very careful how I think and respond to this one. I think it's becoming less and less. It's a woman leader thing, but it's still there. I don't think you'll ever be able to negate that. I still see situations now when that unconscious bias still kicks in, because at the end of the day, there's still that sense of, you know, especially when people feel, you know, you should have other responsibilities. Will you be able to carry this and what it takes? So for example, there'll still be people who are going to look and say, okay, now you're a woman, you've got a family and whatever else. This job is going to require, you know, all hours and all this and whatever. Do I want to do that to you? Is it something? So that is somebody deciding for you, right? As opposed to asking you, are you comfortable? Have you made arrangements to make sure you'd be able to take a responsibility like this, which is going to, you know, interfere with your work life? And the difference there is very clear. Nobody thinks about that when they're looking at a man. Yes? Nobody ever sits to think that. It's becoming a little bit more so, but still nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. So yes, the difference is still there, but what I'm very, very happy about when I reflect on the last even 5 years is look how many women leaders are out there now. Look how many women are doing incredible things, leading incredible businesses out there, you know, irrespective of all these, and showing up as fantastic mentors and fantastic examples, right? And role models for other women. And I think that's what's giving the confidence to a lot of the younger generation to stand up and say, you know what, I can do this. Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about speaking up, because as you said that no one really asked the woman, are you able to manage this? Are you able to take on this role? You're an advocate for speaking up as a woman. Can you tell us about how women should, you know, put themselves out there and speak up about what they want? I think I spoke about this even when I did my CTA, and you know, it's one of the one that caught a lot of attention when I look at the news about this thing called visibility. And maybe I'll just unpack the conversation around visibility. Even I'm sitting here with you. There'll be some people who say, oh my goodness, there she goes again, another another interview. Doesn't she get tired? you know, really, this is so vain and so this and so that. And the truth is, this is where the balance is. And there's some people who get it. And I think a lot more people need to get this conversation. When you drive visibility, it's not about vanity, right? If you're doing it for vanity, it shows. It will very clearly, you know, because the conversation you're having, it's going to be very clear that, oh my goodness, there she goes again, you know, that kind of conversation. I think why you need to drive visibility is if indeed you're trying to showcase who you are, what you do, what you stand for, and if indeed you have a deeper purpose in some way to, you know, give faith to somebody out there. So I sit down and I say, if I ever speak somewhere and there are 2 or 3 people who sit down and say, you know, that thing you said resonated with me. You know, I was struggling with this, and the fact that you said that, you've struggled with that, or you have this issue, or that it's possible for me to do that, that validates any visibility. Then there's a second aspect, which is around how you grow, how you get your next opportunity. I sat and was speaking to another group, I think, of leaders, both mixed in another organization. It was an impact organization. And one lady said something that was so powerful. And I said, I'm going to keep repeating this. Why you need to be visible as well is so that your work is seen. Mm-hmm. How many times do you sit back and say, it is not my place? Let my boss or let somebody else go and speak to what is happening. Do you know when they go speak to it? What do they say? We have done this, and in what we have done, right? Yeah. And they go out there and they're the ones who are seen to have done and achieved that. You who did all the work don't get any credit, right? Yeah. And yes, you might eventually do that, but that person is going to move ahead. Yet you are the one who did the work. And this particular lady, there's a lady who said something so powerful. She said the thing that started, created the inflection for her career was saying one time, I say, no, please give me the chance to go to the US, whichever it is, to showcase the work that we're doing in this market. And she could go there and say, the way I saw it and the impact I wanted, then it became an I. And suddenly now the person was saying all the we's. People see the person, the I, was actually doing the work. And that was the visibility she needed to keep moving and moving and growing. So I think for me, when I speak visibility is from that perspective. When I speak to lessons that you share, that is what I think is a positive aspect of visibility. If you want to get another role, if you want to get on a board, for example, you have to showcase, you have to sit down and say, this is my skill set, this is what I want. You have to speak to people and say, if there's this opportunity, how do I do that? Which is why I'm an ambassador on the Women on Boards Network, to try and encourage women to showcase themselves, to make them visible, so that when conversations are sitting somewhere, there's a depository, there's a bank of people they can look at. Because what do? You'll only look to the ones you know, the people within your close sphere. But when you drive your visibility, then you're opening the sphere for those who are looking for people, for opportunities, and that's something you just have to do.
I like that. And speaking about boards, you've been on a number of boards, and you currently are on a number of boards. What does sitting on a board mean to you, or it's actually serving? I'm told these days not sitting.
It's not sitting. You serve. Yes.
So what does that mean to you?
I would say from the time I was a child is one thing I always wanted to do, because it changes the face of the corporate world, because when I was growing up, it was all male dominated. So for me, that was the achievement. How do I change the face so that others can believe, no, this is not the world for one gender. Yes, other genders can actually sit there and contribute. But I think for me, why I look to serve on board is just the exposure it gives you. Let me tell you, it's the best way to do many different jobs at the same time and to learn in so many different times. Now, when I sit on a particular board, which has incredible practices, for example, HR and the way they do things, the way they track, you can come back to your organization and realize, oh my goodness, we are in trouble. You know, we're so far behind. And you're learning that without going for training, without, going through all the different learning curve and everything else. So every board I've sat on has allowed me to grow and to learn in spaces which, you wouldn't have been able to, because how many jobs can you do anyway? And so that's the other aspect that I've absolutely enjoyed. And then the other thing is, confidence, building my self-confidence. The more exposure you get, the more confident that you become. And so when I reflect on my last 20 years sitting on different boards, when I think of how I was in my first one, nervous, unsure, do I speak, am I going to sound stupid when I say this, to where I am now, where I can look and reflect and say, even if I don't know, it is okay to say I don't know, right? Because that's how you learn and you grow. But also the sheer exposure it gives you. I mean, from financial services, which I do now, to banking, to an airline, to, you know, the foundation work, you know, from Vodafone to M-Pesa or whatever it is, you just get a fantastic spectrum of what's going on in the world, which is outside of what you may perhaps learn from your day job. Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, and that's what I enjoy. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, what does success mean to you?
Oh my goodness. You know, when you approach a time when you're thinking now what's going to be your next horizon, mm-hmm. you know, it's something I'm reflecting on a lot now. What does success mean to me? I think when I was young, I was very clear. Success for me, one of the most important things was going to be family life. You know, my children, were they going to go through school, you know, in our generation, the Gen Zs don't care about these papers. I remember I did a podcast and they would tell me, oh, you know, your generation, you are taught this is what you do. You go to college, you do this, you get a job. Yeah. That's not the thing. Mm. But that is how I was brought up. So for the children, that's the way you think. For your kids, exactly. That's what you want for them. So, but success for me, I think, is first and foremost for them finding their feet, finding their passion, finding their purpose in life. That for me is going to be my overriding success story from a life point of view. I think the second success is around, are there people who I have encouraged to live out their purpose, to be better, to live out their full potential? I think for me that is also success. The more I think about it, the more I realize success for me, have I given hope? Have I encouraged people to do something they may not have done? Have I given individuals the chance to say, actually, I'm okay, right? Failure is okay, not success is okay. You know, whatever I want to do is okay. Switching, going from one thing to the other is okay. I think that's the other aspect that I believe from a success point of view for me. And increasingly, I'm thinking from a purpose point of view. That's probably how I want to live out that particular aspect. And then the third thing is, if I'll have changed anything, any environment I've been in for the better, laid a foundation, that'll be fantastic. Because success for me is sitting down and saying, you know, right, you might be sitting here, the organization you've left may look like this, but have I planted a seed, yes, which is going to grow into a tree that others can sit under the shade of? You know, there's the African proverb that says, you don't plant a tree and expect to sit under its shade. And that's been my overriding mantra in every organization that I've been in. Have I at least planted that tree? And in years to come, will there be some shade for people to sit under it?
Wow, yeah. I think that's very powerful. Yeah. Now, before we go to our quick fire section, I'd just like to know, what has been one of those lowest points in your life? And how did you move from that? We talked about bouncing back, but just pick one. My goodness. It can be professional, it can be personal, and just how did you overcome?
I've had many low points. My goodness, I think we could do a whole session on low points. And I kept telling you, at what point are people going to talk about their low points and how they bounce back and how they're able to sit down? Because the world looks at you and thinks your life has all been rosy and perfect. And, you know, how come you're able to do this? And I think for me, low points, I always speak about my youth and the time at university and having to deal with all the bias from this Miss Kenya thing, which I forgot for a long time. I think that whatever I do shaped me a lot because it allowed me to outlive that more than anything else. Career-wise, there have been many. I always sit down and say one of my lowest points was a time when I was working at, in fact, I'll be very honest, it's it must have been my first or second year at the brewery or something like that. And we were driving the numbers, it had to be, the numbers have to be delivered and everything else. And I forgot that it's people who do it. So you start to drive people to the point that, you know, they're like, oh my goodness, you know. And in that organization, they used to do these engagement scores things. And I remember having the worst one across. And I think that also fundamentally changed me because I sat down and said, never again do I want to then be at a point where I'm driving people to a point where you're the lowest from from giving them the growth and everything else. And then the other low points, my current role, I've had so many lows in the last 3 years of doing this role, because I think I also underestimated what it takes in this particular industry. I think dealing with negative social media on your, the things that I said, which are totally untrue, paid sometimes. I mean, I've literally had people pay things, the people to speak things about you. And I'll sit down, I'm like, why does it have to be like this? Yeah. Why? What, the effort it takes to put somebody down.
Yeah.
If you use that effort to stand on your toes and stand up, you'll go so much further. You'll leave this person you're putting down behind. So those have been some lows. But then again, I always share another African proverb, about the person in the river. If you're swimming in a river naked and a madman takes your clothes, if you walk out naked and chase that madman with your clothes, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to know who's a madman. Who's a mad person? Is it you? So that's why I never respond. Okay. And I sit down and say, no. And I always advise people, if you're taking a battering, take the higher ground. Always take the higher ground. I think the challenges of turning around this business are really, really low point for me, because I sit down and I'm like, what do you do? Because there's always a perfect storm coming in from somewhere in terms of trying to figure out how all the elements come together so that you can drive overall growth. And the issues is when you're a listed company, it is always a challenge, because I say we all wash our underwear, but when you're a listed company, you're washing your underwear and hanging it out to dry in public as well. So there's all those things that I think are particular lows, and I think the most important thing I think I'd like to share with everybody, it's not the end of the world. Ask yourself, always look for the good things that you've done. Build on the good things. Try and figure out whether those good things are enough to, again, be the tree that has been planted for the shade in future. And that's actually one of my last messages. I keep saying, yes, it's fine. It might be tough. There might be things that have not worked. There's so many things that may not be coming together. There's so many perfect storms, which may mean that, look, because performance might be it. But what are the good things? Are there good things you can point to that have come through, that you've touched and impacted? And then hold those, because that is what continues to keep you holding your head up high and continuing and following through.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like us to specifically talk about that evaluation part that you're talking about. Yes. And you realize you had the lowest score. How does somebody reinvent themselves from that position? Because, if somebody, the organization, employees look at you at a certain way, how do you now reinvent yourself? And people start saying, is this a gimmick? Have you actually,
And you realize, I think it took a lot of introspection, reflection, and getting a coach. And which is why I purposely said I also wanted to be a coach. And eventually I got coaching certification and also emotional intelligence certification, because at that time, there's lots of pressure you're under. Yes, there's a family side, which nobody ever necessarily looks at, which probably drives a lot of what you're doing. There's a personal thing around success. Am I succeeding? And then you then forget that this is Claire. Have I asked Claire if she's not doing something? What is holding her back, right? So that drive, I have a lovely friend who, we're very good friends. And now she reflects, she says, okay, now it doesn't matter. It worked for me the way you put it. Because I told her, you've got to learn to walk and chew gum. She every time that she sees it, but do you remember how you told me I've got to learn to walk and chew gum? And I sit down and say, okay, yes, I'm sorry, but and it's figuring out how do you allow the pressure to come out in a kind way, in a way that, and that's why they talk about vision and driving people's belief that there's a future to be done, and then they all work instead of hammer. I think my biggest lesson at that time is that hammering people is not necessarily going to give you the best result. Influencing them to want it is probably going to get you a better result.
I think that's very powerful.
Yes.
Now let's switch gears a little bit. I want to know, what's your current read? Or what genres of books do you like to read?
Oh my goodness, there's so much going on in my life right now. I think from a combination of thinking, what next, you know, I'm approaching what they call the official retirement age. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, now what do I want to do in this phase of my life? So my genre has been a lot around stuff that allows you to reflect on life. But then on the other hand, it has also been around lighter stuff. I've always loved things with happy endings. I won't lie. I can't watch a movie that doesn't have a happy ending. I will not. I won't even force myself to do it. If it's an action, I know action movies, the hero or heroine always wins. So I love action movies. So in terms of books, I've always liked crime, because the crime that work and eventually something comes up. You know, Connolly, oh my goodness. I've read all, and I'm an audiobook person these days. My audio book library is, you know, reeling as we speak. Grisham has always been a great fan, somebody I've always enjoyed his books. And then from an introspection point of view, The Courage to be Disliked has been something I said, that is such an interesting book, right? Because the principles it teaches you around life were just incredible. And every now and then, so what I've downloaded is, yes, I've read the full book, but I've downloaded the shorter version, so that every time I'm feeling down, I sit down like, okay, now let me go back to some of the principles around that, and that really introspection around yourself, and always asking yourself, when you're doing something, what is driving it? What is driving it? Is it a desire to do good, or is it a desire to do something else? And every time I feel there isn't a desire to do good in an action, it allows me to stop, right? And I think that is the sort of thing that I'm reading now. That is the journey that I'm following. I also, from an emotional intelligence point of view, last year I went for the emotional intelligence, the certification I do through Profiles International. They have this Genos conference where they have these incredible people who come and talk to you about the power of getting to know yourself better. And last year, I mean, there was this incredible guy who talked to you about things like gratitude. How in life, every day, you have to keep asking yourself, what am I grateful for? What is my gratitude? And that underlying belief in yourself that you will overcome. It doesn't matter how tough things are. You have to deal with the tough, but believe that in all that, somewhere along the way you win. That is the wisdom. Because he shared the story of this prisoner of war guy who spent years, and how he overcame and encouraged others to overcome that. So I think that is a space I'm in right now, because, you know, it's about looking back now a lot more around legacy stuff. I'm at the stage of what is the legacy stuff that you want to leave. And before you start talking legacy, you have to figure out, are you offering any? What is it? And then you can look forward.
And speaking on legacy, before I go back to my quick fire questions, what is the next phase for Patricia?
Oh my God. If I was to tell you that's the single biggest thing preying on me now, it would not be a lie. It keeps me awake at night. It reflects. I think, honestly and truly, I still believe perhaps I've not done enough on the social impact side. And I ask myself, is that where I want to finish from a perspective of impact? Because there's something, when I look at the jobs I ever did, my role at Stanford Seed was the longest same time of job that I ever did, because I was 6 years with that program. There was some satisfaction that came from that, which perhaps is a great way to finish.
Wow. Okay, awesome.
Now
back to our quick fire. Who's on your playlist right now?
Hey. You want to ask playlist? My playlist is the most eclectic. The most eclectic. You know, if I tell you, I've got Afro jams, I've got Amapiano beats, then I've got the lovely soul, feel good. I've got all the lovely old love songs when I'm in that mood, you know. So, you know, music, it depends on my mood. When I'm feeling upbeat, the jam is going to be, you know, definitely all Afrobeat.
Yeah.
You know, anything Afrobeat, from Nigerian to Kenyan to Saudi soul to my good old Diamond, who every now and then lets me down. But anyway, I still like him. Yeah. What can I do? You know, what can I do? And then to, when I'm feeling reflective, then, you know, and then jazz. Jonathan Butler, for some reason, is really getting me at the moment. So there's something about his beats and his music that is very calming to me at this particular time. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And finally, what do you do for fun?
Hey, my fun. Oh my God. Fun for me has to have a number of elements, and they don't necessarily have to sit in the same place. They have to have sun. Sun for me, somewhere, sunshine has to be there. Yeah. I love sea. Sea is another fantastic element that allows me fun. Then good food. Good food, great company is fun. I love to travel, and I've increasingly found I like the balance of traveling alone, but also traveling with a group of close friends who have the same source and spirit. Don't ever put me on one of those bus holiday things where this time 5 you have to be here, 6 here, 10 here. I can't do that, Claire. Don't ever. That is torture for me. It's not fun. With a schedule, I'm not a schedule person. So don't tell me that is fun. So just anywhere where there's a lot of spontaneity for me is a lot of fun. And I say this, and you know, you come to accept yourself. I love to shop. Okay, so look, if I'm feeling whatever, just put me bright lights, nice shop, nice shoes, nice heaven, you know. And especially shoes. I don't know what it is about shoes. Honestly and truly. Yeah. So
how many pairs do you have?
Do you want me to take you up your look? You can take some. What is your size? I mean, you know, I'm always being told to purge. You know, I mean, like these ones now, I'm feeling, you know, I just look at them like, oh my goodness, look at those shoes, man. They are just, you know, they're really, I am a shoe person. I love my shoes and everything else. But, you know, I think for me, I've also recognized that in life, you have to work hard, play hard. That's my mantra in life. If anybody doesn't get that concept, my daughter, for example, my older daughter gets it. If there's something I've taught her is that you work hard, play hard. Work hard, and she's learned that. Put in the hours and then take time off. Take time off. Don't drill yourself endlessly. Always learn to take that time off, because it allows you to just have a different perspective. And as I've said, travel. Travel opens your mind. You realize the world is just so big and so different. It teaches you tolerance. It teaches you acceptance of difference and diversity. So really do that.
Awesome. So in conclusion, I'd like you to look at the camera and speak to those women coming up in their careers. What is that one thing you'd like to leave with them on growing, failing forward, and working hard and playing hard?
I think I'd like to tell all the women out there, the first overriding message is you have to believe and tell yourself every day that I am okay. A long time ago, I was told, stand in a mirror. You might feel foolish, but just do it anyway. Stand in front of the mirror and keep telling yourself, I'm okay. I'm okay. Rule number one. The second thing is that, you know, the only thing that's ever going to hold you back is yourself. The day you recognize that, when push comes to shove, when the day of reckoning comes, the person who you're going to be having the conversation with is just yourself. That is what's going to give you the freedom to explore every single potential that you have without holding back. And learn that if you hold back, ask yourself why you're doing it. Are you doing it because of others, or are you doing it for yourself? If you're doing it for others, don't. If you're doing it for yourself, then internalize. Why is it so important for you to do that? And the only way you're ever going to fly is when you let go. So ladies, look in that mirror, tell yourself you're okay, and then let go.
You've heard it from Patricia Ithau. Work hard, play hard, and the only one who can stand in your way is you. So go for it. This has been She Means Business. I have been your host, Claire Munde. Until next time, have a good one.